This gate at the Oklahoma City Memorial marks the moment just after the blast. The empty chairs honor 168 lost. And the reflecting pool gives visitors a place to remember what those who were here will never forget.
April 19th, 1995, a morning like any other in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. When the sun set, it was one of those days that would live in infamy. A madman, a coward, had packed a truck with a mixture that would rip into the hearts and minds of America. 168 people were killed, almost 700 people were injured. America would never be the same again, and life would never be the same for those who were there picking up the pieces of buildings and of lives. Let's welcome in two very special guests. They both carried the rank of chief in the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department. They were both there in Oklahoma City following the explosion and experienced firsthand what terrorism is really like. From the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department, Chief Ronald K. Bernard and Chief Jeffrey W. Strickland. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Let's go back to the day. Where were you when you first heard the news, and where were you when you first found out that you were about to go to Oklahoma City? Jeff?
I was at home and like everything, saw it on the news first and all the other things breaking in. But back in the day we had pagers, so we got paged just as a notification, and then we called in. We didn't know exactly what our status was, if we would be going or not, so we just kept the situational awareness, watching TV, getting the best information we could.
Ron, with regard to situational awareness here, I mean, what Jeff says here is, so you were already part of a group that you knew that there was a possibility that if something like this happened, you were going to be called on, correct?
Yes.
What was that group? How does that group form, and how did that come together for you guys?
Well, it started years ago. A group of volunteers got together, and when there was a disaster overseas, they convinced the fire chief to allow them to respond and help out. And then that just grew from there. Funding came up, and then the team just expanded.
Had you been on anything before this? I mean, any major disaster before this? I guess I know you were trying to think back to your timeline a little bit, go back to Hurricane Andrew, I think.
Yeah, so in the early 90s, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, started the Urban Search and Rescue System in about 91. The first deployment was 93, which was the Northridge earthquake.
In California.
California was the first activation where they sent these teams. Right now there's 28 of these teams throughout the nation. The Oklahoma City bombing at the Murrah building was the first test of this system where they actually got them on the ground and they had to work. 11 of these task forces responded and worked for multiple days to, get the victims out of the rubble and save whoever we could save and recover whoever we could recover, just to help them heal and bring a little closure to this incident.
Let's bring us then down to Oklahoma City. Ron, you get the plane ride there. You go. I mean, you obviously had. I mean, did you take the plane, or did you took your trucks? How did you drive up there?
Yeah, how did we get there?
We flew.
We flew.
You flew up there.
Yeah.
You get there. You go to the site. You've seen it on TV, but then you're faced with looking up at this building and this hole in this building. What was the first thing, Ron, that you thought? How did that affect you?
I remember thinking it was the worst thing that I'd ever seen in my life, and never been to anything like it, and just wanted to help.
Did you think when you looked at this that you would find anybody alive? The enormity of that.
We really didn't know. We were hoping and looking and searching, and it did get to a point where we realized that we were there to recover as many people as we could, and that's what we focused on. And I remember our task force leader telling us that, our job was now to get everyone out of there.
Everyone meaning any bodies,
right,
that you could find at that point.
Yes.
What was it? What was that time like when you're there, you're searching, you're part? How many other groups were there? Just so I know. I mean,
11 task forces, and there's 70 personnel per task force, so about 700 personnel in the Urban Search and Rescue System, just for that function.
Okay, and they give you all a specific area that they wanted you to search in the building, or they just?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we all had our specific area, and we worked 24 hours around the clock. And I remember, my first night, I was on the night shift. So we call it Alpha Bravo. So you cut it in half, you're working at least 12 hours, which is normally a 14 to 16 hour day. And I just remember walking, and there's a building, you see, it actually happened in the back. They drive you up to the front, you walk around the building. It was rainy and cold. And we're from South Florida, we don't like cold too well. But I coming around the corner where the command post was and just standing there and looking up in awe of the enormity of the situation, the power that it took to hurt this building and hurt these people was, you know, something that I hadn't seen before.
You guys deal in a very difficult part of life and death every single day. When you were there, you're going through the rubble. Did you recover anybody?
We recovered quite a few. I think one of the most challenging parts was there's a lot of tradition. It was a federal building, so you know there's ceremonies when you recover, either anyone, but also you know a military person or a sworn individual to protect his country. You know, they cover them with, you know, everybody would stop. We had a certain ceremony they would go through, and you know it's heart-wrenching. I think the hardest part for me was the daycare center when you're digging through the rubble and you're just finding small little sneakers and things like that and looking for the rest of what should be there with the sneakers was very hard.
Do you still get emotional when you think about it?
Yes, I do, and you know, especially with the children, because you know, my story. My wife reminded me this morning that you know I was young, wasn't married for a few years, and she actually told me on the phone that she was pregnant with our child then, and she wouldn't tell anybody till I got back.
You didn't know when you left?
Didn't know. And then, you know, I came back and we told everyone, and by the 1 year anniversary, I had a baby son.
Ron, I've only got about a minute. We'll take a break with news and then come back. But what was it like for you in those moments of finding a body, finding someone?
Well, just unbelievable. You know, you don't really. You want to find a body to provide closure, but it's not a great experience to do that, to find a body and pull them out.
Do you ever get over that? I mean, do you ever? I understand that you've done a lot of these things. You've had a lot of tough, but do you ever get over that moment?
I don't know if you do or not. I think time heals a lot, but you always go back and think about it. Like Jeff, the nursery, I worked there for quite a bit, quite many hours. And like he said, just finding the toys.
Hold that thought for 1 second, because I do want to talk with that. Ronald Bernard, Jeffrey Strickland, the Chiefs are going to come back and join us. When we continue here, we'll talk more about what happened in Oklahoma City that day and preparing the world and America for 9/11. Welcome back to MidPoint. Our special guests from the Miami-Dade, Florida Fire Rescue Department, Chief Ronald Bernard and Chief Jeffrey Strickland. They were there April 19th, 1995, part of the responders when the Oklahoma City explosion happened. Ron, I want to get to you when it comes down to the people here, because your job is to find people, is to bring them home. What was it like dealing with the people of Oklahoma and the people there who obviously always wanted to try to come up to you and say, help me find somebody?
Well, they set up a reception center where we stayed at night or in the daytime when we were off. And the outpouring of love and gratitude that the people of Oklahoma showed was unbelievable. They would come up to us and offer us gifts and just console us. And at times they would show us pictures of loved ones and ask us if we had come across them in our search. And that became very painful.
Is it painful to think of the guy who did this? I mean, if you think about it, one man did this, really, and killed so many people. Do you ever think about that in your job, or is that just something that you try to put out of your mind?
I put it out of my mind. I don't think about him.
You have to, simply because it's not worth it. He's not worth it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the people again and being there, this was terrorism. This was the first time on American soil, really, that something this large had happened, and it really set everybody, we were stunned that it happened. What did it do to you personally when you saw that and knew that this was an attack by someone who killed men, women, and children for no other reason than he wanted to hurt people in this country, wanted to bring that message home?
It's tough, especially with domestic terrorism, to deal with that, but I think I might share some of the feelings with Ron is, this is the career I chose, the path I chose is to help people. And no matter what the cause is, that's what I'm here for. So I don't focus on the cause. I focus on what I can do to help it make it better. And that's my training. That's what I do. We're not part of the investigation looking for them. We're just trying to fix that immediate problem and help the people that are hurting right now. So I really don't give it that much thought, to tell you the truth.
You were both at Ground Zero too, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
You both went. I'm sorry, but I have a tough time wrapping my head around that, because you went to this thing in Oklahoma City and then to 9/11, two of the worst terrorist attacks on American soil. How do you process that when you deal with that? Because you are around horror, death, and that's tough to deal with.
Yes, but in our careers, and my 30-year career, I've been deployed almost 15 times. But if you look at the numbers and add it up, the majority are acts of nature. The Haiti earthquake, a dozen hurricanes, and if we look at the numbers, the acts of terrorism that hurt that many people on United States soil are much lower. But it's much more emotional, of course, because of that cause. But our job is to go and help the people that are impacted, no matter what the cause. So we focus on the damage and focus on how to rescue, recovery, or fix the situation, no matter what the cause is, natural or man-made.
Go ahead, Ron.
No, and whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, we have to put our emotions aside, because everybody's emotional, and we have to go there and help with the situation and not make it worse. So we're trained over our years to control our emotions. Otherwise, we can't do our job.
I only got about a minute left. How did this change you? I mean, when you went to Oklahoma City, because that, as I said, terrorism on that scale, what kind of an impact did that have that still lasts to this day? Anything?
No, I really don't. It really didn't impact me, except the destruction, again, as I said, and the outpouring of love that the people of Oklahoma showed. I mean, that stayed in my heart forever.
Have you been back?
No, I haven't.
You haven't been back? Have you been back since?
I have been back. I was deployed to the Moore, Oklahoma tornado last year or the year before. And again, what struck me is the people of Oklahoma and how nice they are and how willing they were to help everybody. And that's the first time I went back to the memorial.
We talk a lot about, I interview a lot of people in the military, law enforcement, fire departments. Thank you. I mean, let me just say this for everybody here. Thank you to you guys for what you do, the men and women that you lead. You help, you bring us hope, and you put your lives on the line for us every single day. I cannot express that enough. And please pass that on to everybody else, and thank you for helping America.
We'll do
Really.
it.
Chief, thank
Our
you so
honor to
much.
serve.
Chief, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, and it's a tough story to tell, but I really appreciate you sharing with us. A civilian was tasked with documenting major events, and he documented this one. He's going to join us next, right here on MidPoint.